Okay, hi everyone. My name's Ben Horth. I'm the International Steward for CUPE 3902 and welcome to this info session on immigration and permanent residency. There's 60 of us here currently. We had about 90, I think, registered, which is really fantastic. It's great to know that there's interest in this and a need for it, and that's something that the local can take back. And I was speaking to the executive director, Wayne, earlier today, and he said, you know, we can't offer this kind of session enough times. So we'll certainly see about offering it again later this year. But I want to, welcome you. I want to first make sure everyone is aware that there is a WhatsApp group chat now started for international members of the local, and I'm going to post the link to that in the chat there. That's partly to deal with the fact that we're in a webinar format today, and so we won't have the capacity to chat with each other, but it's also, that can be a space for us in lieu of an active international caucus, which is something we can discuss at a different time. You know, a way for us as international members to stay in touch with each other, to ask one another questions about our experience, and also to organize around our common issues and interests. So join that if you like, if you have WhatsApp, either on your phone or your computer, which I recommend having. And before I introduce Elizabeth and Zia, who've kindly agreed to host this session for us, I'm going to throw first to Amy Conwell, who's the chair of the local.
Thank you so much, Ben. And again, I just want to welcome everyone to this session. I'm so glad to see such a large number of you here. And I think it's really important that we offer this kind of support to all of you, and that we reoffer it, as Ben said. So just one more time, I'm Amy Conwell. I'm the chair of your union, CUPE 3902. You're a member of 3902 by virtue of your work, which falls under the scope of one of our 6 units and collective agreements that we negotiate. And being in a union means that you all get the chance to renegotiate your contracts together every 3 years and use your collective strength to build more bargaining power than you would alone. And using our strength in this way together has given our local the opportunity to make great wins for international workers over the years. So for example, for those of you who are in Unit 1, which represents teaching assistants, course instructors, and others, you might have heard of our International Workers Legal Fund, or UofT. And this is a fund that we have won through bargaining that offers support to international workers who might be experiencing difficulties related to their visa and/or immigration status that interferes with their ability to perform their bargaining unit work. So again, just really glad to see you here. I hope to see you at future union meetings, and I'm going to drop the link to the International Workers Legal Fund in the chat in case that's useful for any of you. I'll pass it back to you now, Ben.
Thanks so much, Amy. I actually just threw that link in the chat right now, unless you have a different one. But yeah, definitely check that out, folks. And yeah, just to sort of echo what Amy said, I hope that us coming together for this purpose can also be the basis of you know, a continuing conversation around our needs and how we can support one another in the context of union organizing. But to the events of the day, I'm going to introduce now briefly. I mean, I'm actually going to throw some more links in the chat with further details about the 2 wonderful lawyers who are joining us today. But Elizabeth Long and Zia Sumar are from Long Mangoji LLB, a law firm here in Toronto. And these are the links to their bios on the website. But Elizabeth wanted me to let you know that she is a graduate of UofT. So some personal experience from which she can speak, as well as one of only 50 lawyers to be certified as specialists in citizenship and immigration law in Canada. So we really are hearing from the best today. So that's Elizabeth's bio, and that's Zia's bio there in the chat. But I'm going to, without further ado, throw to Elizabeth and Zia and thank them again very much for offering this today.
Well, thank you so much for that wonderful intro. you know, it's always a pleasure to be here with you guys. I think the fact that you have such a great union who supports you as international workers, you are on a different playing field than Canadian workers. Immigration is plays such a large part and intersects with employment so much that it's sometimes the balance and the imbalance of power is certainly there, and it really does help when you have a great union who can be there to support you as well. So today what we're going to do, and before I start our presentation, just wanted to run through some logistics with you guys. There's that Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. When we do the presentation, feel free to put in any Q&A questions in there, and we will be going through your questions. We may or may not get through everything, okay? But we'll go through your questions at the end and try to address some of your questions, okay? So here's the thing. Today, Zia and I, we're going to be talking about permanent residence for sure. But before we talk about permanent residence, it's very important that you guys understand what you are dealing with your current status as temporary residents. And also, you know, if you want to apply for work permits, if you want to extend, what do you need to do? All right, Zia, take it away. Oh, you're on mute.
The first thing to keep in mind is that you want to make sure while you're here in Canada that you're maintaining your status, okay? So that you're always in status while you're here. Now, when you have a permit, okay, there is going to be an expiry date listed on that permit. And so it's important before that date that you're submitting extension applications so that you can continue working or studying in Canada, okay? As long as you submit your extension application properly, you'll have what's called implied or maintained status. And this means that you can continue working or studying in Canada while you're waiting for a decision on that extension application. And basically, it allows you to continue that activity that you were doing before the expiry of your permit. So if you held a study permit, you can continue studying while you're waiting for that extension application. If you held a work permit, continue working while you're waiting for that extension application. But it's important to note that you'll only afforded implied status if you submit your application properly. So if you submit your application, but forget to include the fees, or if you forget to include a mandatory document like your passport, that's then considered an incomplete application and your application will be returned. And so it's as if you have never filed your application at all, and so you wouldn't be able to benefit from implied status. If you're in that situation, or if inadvertently you just forgot, you missed the deadline for that permit that you hold, there is a period of time where you can restore your status. So this is applying to get your status back. From that expiry date, or from the date that you get a refusal on the extension application, you have 90 days to submit a restoration application. So this is to get status back to what you were before you missed that deadline.
So Zia, just wanted to sort of clarify. If someone applies to extend their status, and then when they apply, they maybe submitted something wrong, and then they get a rejection, right? Mm-hmm. When does their restoration, the 90 days, start counting?
It starts from the date of that refusal, if they've submitted everything properly. If they haven't submitted everything properly, it's as if they've never filed the application, which means it's from the original expiry date on the permit.
Right. And that's really important to understand, guys, because right now, work permit extensions in Canada are taking probably around 120 days. So if you submitted it wrong in the beginning and you think that you have implied status, and if you get it returned, you actually are out of the restoration timeline, which can be a very big issue. Yeah. If that happens to you, do contact a lawyer right away. because it will be quite a big issue at that time.
And while we're clarifying, another big question we usually get is with regards to IRCC's website. So on the website, it says that you have to submit your extension applications 30 days prior to the expiry of your status. That's incorrect. The law is that your extension application needs to be submitted prior to the expiry of your permit. So it doesn't have to be 30 days in advance. It just has to be before the expiry of your permit.
Yeah, and on that sort of same note of how incorrect information sometimes gets passed on by immigration, when you apply to extend your work permit, oftentimes you'll get a letter from IRCC stating that you can work, but only until this date. And they usually list like 90 days from that date. That date is incorrect as well. You can work until a decision is made on your application. Even if it takes a year, you can work until that date, okay? As long as you have implied status, you can work. All right, so the second thing that we want to talk to you guys about is the difference between high skilled versus low skilled work. Now, all of you guys, if you guys are doing you know, your postdoc fellowships, or you guys are TA, RA, that's all high skilled. But oftentimes, sometimes people, when you're studying and you graduate and you're not necessarily working in the academic field, sometimes you may think, oh, you know, I can get this job. Maybe I can get a job at a bank. That's for sure high skilled, right? Not necessarily, okay? And when we talk about permanent residence, you will see that there is a big difference in your options for getting permanent residence, depending on whether or not you have high skilled or low skilled work experience. Now, currently, the classification of work experience is under 5 different categories. It's under the National Occupation Classification Codes, or the NOC codes, and O, A, and B are classified as high skilled, and C and D are classified as low skilled. Now, to add to that complication, there was a new NOC system that it's named NOC 2021, but nobody uses it yet. IRCC has said that they do plan to implement this year. And what it's going to be is there's going to be, instead of 5 categories, there's going to be 6 categories. And so it's going to be tiers instead of O, A, and B. It's called tier, and it's not spelled wrong. It's really TEER is what they're naming it as. So tier 0, 1, 2, 3 is going to be high skilled, and tier 5 and 6 are going to be low skilled. They are going to be downgrading certain high skilled before to low skilled, and there will be 16 other occupations that are upgraded to high skilled. What you know you should get from this in the end is, do know what work that you have done and that you will do know that how it's classified. I just wanted to say, you know, what we tell you guys today is true today, but it could very well change. The way that immigration law works in Canada is the government can just make an announcement, and usually they make these announcements on Friday afternoons because they know, you know, immigration lawyers, you know, don't love to work on weekends. They love to do it also during Christmas holidays, just before Christmas holidays or New Year's as well. But anyway, they can just make an announcement, and that's the law. So what we're going to do is we're going to sign you guys up to this newsletter that we send out whenever new laws come out, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to let you guys know about new laws. You can certainly, you know, you don't have to, you know, if you get it and it's annoying, just, you know, turn it off. But it's the way for us to tell you guys about new laws. Okay. All right. Let's talk about studying and working on its study permits.
Yeah, definitely. So there are some conditions on the study permit that are obvious, right? Like your expiry date that we talked about, it's there, you can see it right on the study permit, and so it's easy to know. But there's also other conditions on the study permit that are not as obvious. like, for example, the condition to be actively pursuing studies. What that means is that while you're here in Canada on your study permit, you do need to be what IRCC calls actively pursuing your studies. And that means that you are working towards the completion of your program. If you stop, so if you finish your program early, if you decide to leave your program and so you're no longer actively pursuing your studies, then you automatically lose status on that study permit 90 days after you stop studying. So if you finish your program early, even if there's another 2 years left on that study permit, it doesn't mean that you will hold student status in Canada for 2 years. Once you finish that program, even though it's earlier than the expiry date, from the date that you complete the program, you will hold student status for 90 days. And after that, the study permit becomes invalid. Now, the two exceptions to this rule is one, if you're on a scheduled break, and this means so these are breaks that are a part of your school calendar, part of your program. So these are breaks that are already part of the academic calendar. It's not a break that you decide to take. It has to be one that the school recognizes. And the second is if you're on an authorized leave. So for example, if you needed to take some time off, you need to let your school know. And you have to get actually an authorization, written authorization from the school, which will allow you to take a break from your program of study. So these are the two exceptions for the requirement to be actively pursuing your studies. Now, during the pandemic, IRCC has come out and said, okay, we understand that people may not be able to travel to Canada, may be stuck outside of Canada. And so they have brought in temporary policies to allow people to study outside of Canada during the pandemic. So if your classes are completely online and you're not physically in Canada up until this summer, so summer 2022, you're still going to remain eligible for the postgrad work permit, regardless of doing your classes online and outside of Canada. However, when we talk about the long-term effects of these online courses, basically when we look at the express entry route towards permanent residence, and we will talk about it in a moment, there are points that are awarded to applicants for having completed a program of study in Canada. But at this time, it still looks like if you've studied outside of Canada online, you unfortunately would not be eligible for those points. Now, while you're in your program, a very important part of it is being able to work using your study permit. Okay, so automatically full-time students are able to work off campus using your study permit, as long as, like I said, you are a full-time student. That ability to work, though, is limited. So during the school semester, you're able to work up to 20 hours a week. During any regularly scheduled break, you can work full-time. That ability to work does end once you've completed your program of study. So once you're no longer a full-time student, you have to stop working using your study permit. And then lastly, if you're between programs, so if you finish a program of study and you're going to be starting a second program of study, so long as the time between the two programs is less than 150 days, you're able to work full-time between your programs as well. So basically with the study permit, there is the ability to work off campus.
So Zia, just wanted to clarify a few things. Someone can be working on campus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Full-time, okay? Let's say they're let's say they're doing an RA/TA work. Then can they also work part-time off campus?
Yeah, so you can, the off-campus rules and the on-campus rules are two very separate abilities to work. You can work on campus as many hours, but the off-campus hours are what's limited, right? So off-campus, you can only work up to 20 hours during the school year and full-time during any scheduled break. And this is in addition to working on campus.
But it's very important also to understand that you have to be a full-time student. You can't just be part-time student and work off campus. You have to be a full-time student.
Exactly.
So except in that last semester. So there's a special exception there for if you're in the last semester. Now, let's talk about the timeline for when they're completing their studies. Let's say we have a PhD student, right? And they are going to defend their thesis. They finished their classes, they're about to defend their thesis. What would you say would be their ability to work at that point? They haven't defended yet.
So they're still considered a student at that point, which means that they are still able to work off campus.
Okay. And is it full-time, part-time?
So it's the same rules. It's part-time up to 20 hours a week, because they're still in their semester.
Okay. Now, if they defended their thesis, waiting for the result.
Still a student, so still up to 20 hours a week off campus.
Okay. They've received the result saying that they've passed. And they have their grades on the transcript showing that they've completed everything.
So it's at that point that you're no longer considered a student, which means you can no longer work using your study permit. So all work has to stop on that study permit.
And so they can't work full-time, they can't work part-time, they can't work at all.
Exactly, not at all.
Okay. And then then we're going to talk about this. Once you've applied for your postgrad work permit, then you can start working full-time.
Exactly.
All right.
Perfect segue to the postgrad.
Sorry. Yeah.
That's the perfect segue to the postgrad.
Exactly. All right. So for those of you who have postgrad, who are eligible for postgrad work permits, I have to say this is what I call a golden ticket for your life. And you actually only get one golden ticket most of the time. Okay. I say right now the law is that you can only get one postgrad work permit. Last year, the government had a special policy allowing some people to extend their postgrad work permits. Maybe they might have that this year, but you certainly can't depend on, having special policies for postgrad work permit extensions. For the most part, you need to know that you can only get one postgrad work permit in your life. And this is very important when you are considering, what program you want to do. For example, if you're doing a 1-year master's program, when you graduate, you'll only have 1 year postgrad work permit, right? If you are doing a 1-year master's program and you only have 1 year work permit, and that might not be enough for you to get the work experience to get permanent residence, you could do another program for another 1 year. So 1 + 1 actually equals 3, because anything over 2 years, you'll get a 3-year work permit. Especially right now with, COVID and immigration laws for permanent residence being so up in the air, oftentimes it's much, much less risky to have a 3-year work permit than just have a 1-year work permit. Of course, everybody is different. Different circumstances could apply. Some of you may already qualify for permanent residence even without work experience in Canada. Some of you may be eligible for other kinds of work permits, which Zia will talk about as well. Okay, but this is something you have to keep in mind before you start just randomly applying for postgrad work permit just because you qualify. Okay, sometimes people will apply for a postgrad work permit when they graduate from undergrad, and then they'll go directly into a master's or PhD program, and they would have wasted their opportunity as well at that point, because 3 years would have gone by, they finished their program, and then you're not eligible for another postgrad work permit. Okay, it's all about planning with regard to immigration. Here's the thing about the postgrad. You have to have maintained full-time status at school, except in the final semester. Okay, if you didn't, and the officers now are looking very, very carefully at transcripts, then very, very possibly the officers are supposed to reject the postgrad work permit application. Sometimes on very exceptional circumstances, they may grant it, but it has to be very, very exceptional circumstances. There are set exceptions. One of them is authorized leave. So that's where Zia was talking about. The school gives you stated authorized leave to leave for a semester. Okay. Sometimes people will come to me and say, Elizabeth, I just really am having a difficult time this semester. Maybe finances, maybe, personal issues, maybe illness. I just can't do a full-time load. Should I just do a part-time? And my answer to them is no, don't go part-time. Go and ask the school to give you authorized leave and take off the entire semester and then come back and do full-time. Because otherwise, you would have just wasted your entire education program, because at the end you won't qualify for the postgrad work permit. Okay. So here's what we were talking about. When can you start working full-time? You can start working full-time as long as you apply properly at the right time for your postgrad work permit. Okay, when is the right time to apply for your postgrad work permit? You have to apply after you've completed your program. Okay, so you have evidence. Usually you'll get a letter from the school, and usually you'll submit your transcripts. Both of these show A, that you've completed your program, and B, that you were a full-time student throughout your studies. Okay, and then the deadline to apply is when your study permit expires, or 90 days after when you first received that indication that you've completed your program. Okay, so when you first receive that indication, it's not when you go and get your degree. Okay, it's when let's say something shows up on your portal that says you've completed the program. Okay, you receive a letter, some first indication, and from that date you count 90 days. Now, some of you might say, well, Elizabeth, I went on the IRCC website and it says 180 days I have to complete my program. Why are you saying it's 90 days? It's 90 days because if you went and just applied, let's say 160 days afterwards, what you're going to have is you're going to have a rejection. Because remember what Zia said in the beginning, is you have to be studying in order to maintain your student status, and your student status will expire after 90 days. So if you applied after 90 days for your postgrad work permit without filing a restoration of status, then your postgrad work permit would be rejected because you don't have student status at that point. Also, if you apply after 90 days, your student status would have expired. You're not able to work while waiting for your work permits. And work permits right now take around 4 months to come. So you really want to be able to work while waiting for your work permit. So take it from me, apply within 90 days of the completion of your program, or if your study permit expires before then, it's when your study permit is still valid. Okay.
Perfect.
All right.
Before we go on, just to clarify, when you talk about a 1-year program being eligible for a 1-year postgrad work permit, most academic years are 8 months, right?
That's right.
So Elizabeth, would that qualify for a 1-year postgrad work permit, or is it an 8-month postgrad work permit?
Yeah, great question. It's really about academic years, not necessarily about calendar years. So oftentimes one academic year is actually, 2 semesters. That's usually what it is. It's, they think 1 year is 2 semesters and a break. So if you had a master's, for example, that was 16 months because you didn't have a break in between, that's still counted as a 2-year academic years, and you should be able to get a 3-year work permit at the end.
Perfect. And then
All right.
just to go over the restoration, right?
Mhm.
Because if you lose status, if you miss that 90 days, if you no longer have status, you have to restore. As counterintuitive as it might sound, you have to restore back to a study permit and apply for the postgrad work permit at the same time. And until you get that postgrad work permit, there is no ability to work in the interim, right? You do have to wait until the postgrad work permit is actually granted.
Yeah, it's actually really complicated if you go beyond the 90 days. So try your best not to go beyond the 90 days.
Perfect. So we've spoken a lot about this postgrad work permit, but that's only one type of work permit. There are definitely other work permits that can be available. For someone who's finished their PhD, there's actually a postdoc work permit for individuals who are doing their fellowships, right? So if you have your PhD completed, or if you're near completion of your PhD and you have a fellowship, you can look at applying for the postdoc work permit. So that's a great option that is available. We talked about the postgrad. There are spousal work permits. So a spousal work permit is an open work permit for a spouse of either an international student or for a spouse of someone who's on a work permit as well.
Sia, can we sort of go over who's a spouse?
Yeah, great question. So for immigration purposes, you can have a married spouse, so someone who's gone through and actually has gotten married. But we also have what are called common law spouses. So common law is someone who you have lived with in a marital-like relationship for a period of at least 1 year. A lot of people are surprised when we say it's only 1 year, but for the purposes of immigration, the definition of common law is living together for a period of 1 year.
So if you guys are common law, it doesn't matter whether or not, you feel like a relationship is serious or not. If you guys have been living together for 1 year, on your forms, you have to state that you're common law. If you don't, it's misrepresentation, okay, which is very, very serious, okay?
We also have what are called LMIA-based work permits, so through the Global Talent Stream. Before there was a stream called the owner-operator stream. We put it on here because we still get a lot of questions about it. Service Canada is no longer processing applications under the owner-operator stream. So while it is a popular option, or it was a popular option, unfortunately, as of last year, they stopped processing applications through the owner-operator stream.
Sorry, sorry, go ahead, Zia.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, for a lot of people, they hear LMIAs. Can I get my employer to do an LMIA? I just wanted to let you know, employers hate LMIAs, okay? A lot of times the employer will not want to do a LMIA. An LMIA is something, it's called labor market impact assessment. You have to apply with the Labor Department in Canada to show that the employer is not able to find a Canadian to do the job. For most people, at most positions, it's difficult for an employer to show that, even if they're willing to do that, okay? There are some people who are very, very specialized. For example, you are like the leading expert in your area, and nobody else in the country, or very, very few people in the country, would have your expertise. Maybe that might be possible, but and it has to be pertaining to that job, not just overall you're smart. Okay.
So yeah, so LMIA applications are one type of work permits. The other ones that you see on these slides here, they're all LMIA exempt. So we don't need to get an LMIA. Your employer doesn't have to do an LMIA before you can qualify and apply for these other work permits. Another example of an LMIA exempt work permit are free trade agreements. So basically, through the agreements that Canada has with other countries, there are categories for professionals, which means that, again, without having to do an LMIA, an employer is able to assist you in getting a closed work permit to work in certain professions. There's a number of countries that Canada has free trade agreements with that provide for the ability to get work permits. There is the US, we have agreements with Peru, we have them with Colombia, with European, there's the CETA agreement, so with European countries. So there's quite a few countries right now that Canada does have agreements with, and that do provide for professionals to get work permits through. There's also the...
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say, I forgot to tell you guys, for those of you who are in IT, if you're going to be hired on as computer engineer or computer manager or software engineer, etc., there is a global talent stream where the employers don't have to show they can't find a Canadian to do the job. They still have to do what's called a labor market benefit plan, which means that they have to say that they're going to do certain things for the government if they get to hire you. But it is a little bit easier to get an LMIA if you're in that sector as well.
And faster.
Yeah.
We also have a Francophone work permit. So this is for individuals who are proficient in French. You don't necessarily have to be working in a position where you're using French, but you basically have to be able to show that you are proficient in the language. And as long as you're working outside of Quebec, then you can look at the Francophone program for a work permit. There is work permits for entrepreneurs. So I know, Elizabeth, I think you're going through this a little bit more later on in the presentation, but for someone who is looking to start up their own business here, there's specific work permits for entrepreneurs. And then lastly, we are going to be talking about permanent residence, but if you have filed a permanent residence application and you're waiting for the processing, so you're waiting for a decision on it, you may be eligible to get what's called a bridging open work permit. So again, it's supposed to allow you to continue working while you're waiting in Canada for a decision on that PR application.
All right, let's move on to permanent residence. So the first category I'm going to talk about is the express entry category. I'm going to talk about it first, and then I'm going to tell you what's wrong with it right now as well. Okay. So first, let me just explain what the system is about. What happens is, first, to get into the system, you have to create an online profile. And you get to create an online profile if you qualify under one of three categories: the Federal Skilled Worker class, Canadian Experience class, or the Federal Skilled Trades class. Now, once you've created a profile, it does not mean that you have applied for express entry, okay? You have not applied for anything yet. You have just expressed your ability to qualify and your interest in applying, okay? Once you create a profile, you get to be in the express entry pool. You'll be in there for 1 year, and then your profile will expire if you don't submit an application, okay? And you will have a series of points based on your background, and also if you have provincial nomination. Now, and this is going to be a question this year when they are inviting people, but every 2 weeks or so before, they will have a draw where they have a number. The government will have a number, and now very importantly, a category of which one you qualify for. And if your number is above a certain number and you qualify for a certain category, or you have provincial nomination, you will be invited to apply. Once you have that invitation to apply is only when you can actually apply and submit your application for permanent residence, okay? What's wrong with this system right now is last year, it was very, very easy for a lot of people who are in Canada who qualified under Canadian Experience class to apply for permanent residence. The numbers were super low by the government. At one point, they invited everybody in the pool who qualified under Canadian Experience class. However, the government realized, we invited too many people, and they filled up the inventory for this year by November of last year. So what happened is by October, really, they had stopped issuing invitations for almost everybody in the pool except people who qualified under the provincial nominee program, and they had provincial nominations. What we are hearing is eventually the government will start inviting people again under probably Canadian experience class. They haven't invited people under federal skilled worker class since late 2020. But eventually they do, because Canadian experience class people are people who are usually here in Canada. So they want to make sure that people who are here have a chance to apply. So they probably will open it up sometime this year for Canadian experience class. But because the inventory has been building really high, and because the number, which means the number of people in the pool are a lot, and also they may be inviting a very small number of people, these numbers are likely to be very high. Predictably, they've predicted probably over 500. Okay, so let me just go through a little bit more about how to get into the pool, and we're going to talk about alternatives as well, and what you guys can do. So express entry programs, how to get in. A lot of you, even if you don't have work experience that is after you've graduated, you can probably qualify with your TA, RA experience or work experience, outside of Canada, under the federal skilled worker class. To qualify here, you have to have 1 year of work experience that's high skilled, full-time, which is at least 30 hours a week, continuous, and 1 year full in one occupation. Okay, same occupation. You have to have at least that 1 year of work experience. You have to pass your language exams. I'm sure you guys don't have that issue. Just passing. This is not to get out of the pool, this is just to get in, okay? And then you have to have financial savings as well. Normally around 13,000 or so for a single person. If you have additional accompanying family members, then you're going to add a few thousand per a family member, okay? So this is the federal skilled worker class. The Canadian experience class is very different criteria. Canadian experience class, the work experience that is required is 1 year in the last 3 years. It doesn't have to be continuous. It doesn't have to be in one occupation, okay? But it has to be when you are not a full-time student, and you have to have legal work experience. So if you have, implied status, that's counted towards work experience under the Canadian experience class, okay? But you have to have legal work experience, and you can't be self-employed. So you have to, normally we're looking at a T4. As postdocs, sometimes you may get I think it's called a T4A or T5 or something like that. It could be, it depends on the employment situation, but there was some litigation that was won on that respect as well. But in terms of the work experience, you have to be employed. You can't just open up your business and employ yourself, okay? 1 year high skilled work experience, that's full-time, at least 30 hours a week. 30 times 52 is 1,560 hours. Skill trees, I'm not going to go into. It's really not pertinent to you guys. It's about if you have trades, experience, etc. Okay, so let's say you've gotten into the pool. That's not the end of the story. That's only the beginning. Okay, you'll need to look at how many points you have, and how do you calculate those points? Well, first thing is age. Once you've reached the 30th birthday, it's not going to be really happy birthdays afterwards, because every year you get older in your 30s, it goes down by -5, -6 points. By the time you hit your 40s, it's fast slide -10, -11 points. By the time you get to your 45th birthday, the good news is it doesn't go down anymore, but you do have a big fat 0 on your age. Compared to someone in their 20s who has 110 points, that can be a major difference there, okay? Education, if you guys have, your master's or PhD, you're in a very good stead for education. Language can often be a big deal breaker. So if you don't have work experience in Canada, even when they start inviting people under federal skilled worker class, the language that you'll be required to have would be probably at least a 7 in reading, writing, and speaking for IELTS, and an 8 in listening for IELTS, or 9s in SELF at least, okay? Because at that level, all the points really jump. Relevant Canadian work experience, that's the work experience that I was talking about. That's almost the same as a Canadian experience class, except we count work experience in the last 10 years for this. Foreign work experience, if you have high skilled foreign work experience outside of Canada, usually it's 1 to 2 years is one level, and then 3 years or above is another level. So if you have that, you can get points for that. Spouse depends on their education, language, Canadian work experience. They may add a little bit to you, or they may take away a little bit, just depending on their circumstances. We're going to talk about the provincial nominee programs that are related to the express entry, okay? Because right now, these are the only people who are currently being invited to apply. And if you have provincial nomination, you get 600 points, which means you're basically assured that you are going to be invited to apply. Now, you have to keep in mind that provincial nominee programs, it's not all provincial nominee programs that qualify. It has to be express entry links. Okay, we'll talk about this in a little bit. Previous study in Canada, this is where Zia was saying, when she was saying, if you want to go and study online outside of Canada, it could affect your points. So what happens is right now, and they haven't changed any of the rules for express entry, but right now, if you have studied in a program, it only counts if you were physically present in Canada for at least 8 months. So if you, even if you got your master's, but you were outside of the country, you could do it online. You said, why do I need to be in the country? It's online. Well, according to the rules, if you were, if you were outside of the country studying all this time and you weren't physically in Canada for at least 8 months, then you wouldn't get those points for the master's. Okay. Arranged employment. Now, here is where some of you guys in the postdoc may qualify, but a lot of you guys won't. Postgrad work permits will not work for arranged employment points, which can be 50 points for high skilled work normally, or 200 if you're executive management. But for you guys, let's say 50 points, okay? If you have postgrad work permits, forget about it, you don't qualify. If you have a postdoc work permit, it is an employer specific work permit, but you need to have also a job offer for at least 1.5 to 2 years, okay? For this, and you have to have at least 1 year of work experience as well. So if you guys have keep getting like 1 year contracts, you may not qualify for this. But if you had worked for 1 year for, let's say, UofT, and then you got it renewed and you have a 2-year contract afterwards, then you might be able to get the arranged employment points here. Siblings, you get a few points if they're Canadians or permanent residents in Canada. The ability to be fluent in French is super important and nice, okay? You do have significant points for express entry for this, and there are going to be other programs that you qualify for. Plus, you get access to that Francophone work permit that Zia had said as well, okay? Trade certification, don't bother about that. That's for construction trades.
Before we move on, one thing I do want to clarify about the eligibility for programs. So a lot of you are going to be working as TAs, RAs. And so when we look at that particular type of work experience, because you are a student while you're working as a TA or as an RA, it wouldn't count in the Canadian Experience Class program, right? It doesn't count as work experience for eligibility in the Canadian Experience Class. However, if it is continuous, if you do get your year of experience and the work is continuous and meets all those criteria that Elizabeth talked about when she was looking at the federal skilled worker criteria, you may be eligible, you may be able to use that to be eligible under the federal skilled worker program. Okay, so if you remember, there was two programs that Elizabeth talked about, the federal skilled worker and Canadian Experience Class. So the TNRA may make you eligible for the federal skilled worker, but not necessarily for the Canadian Experience Class because you're a student while you're obtaining that work experience. That's eligibility. When we come here and talk about points in the comprehensive ranking system, okay, because that work experience is in Canada while you're a student, you wouldn't get points at all for that because it doesn't fall under Canadian work experience since you're a student, and it doesn't give you points under foreign work experience because you're in Canada. Okay, so really important to differentiate between eligibility and points.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's talk about another form of getting points and another sort of situation. And we're going to talk about Ontario's provincial nomination program. So provincial nominee programs work like this. See, immigration is normally federal jurisdiction. The federal government is responsible for immigration. But the federal government has also made agreements with every province to allow each province to nominate people who they want to get permanent residence. And every province has a certain quota for the number of people that they are allowed to nominate every year. And every province has their own programs that they want to have. Now, provincial nomination programs are also divided into different categories. There are the express entry streams and non-express entry streams, for example, okay? We're going to be talking first about express entry streams, and these are going to be streams where if you get nominated, you get 600 points added to your express entry application, okay? So this is with Ontario. How Ontario works is you can't just go and apply directly to Ontario, okay? It's kind of like that, you know, that dating app Bumble, where, listen, I'm too old for this. I haven't done it, but this is what I've heard, okay? I've heard that basically it's the guys can't contact the women directly. The women go through who's in the pool, and then they contact the guys first, right? Same thing with this, okay? You're kind of like the guys. You can't go and just contact the provincial government on your own, but you have to be in the pool, otherwise they don't know that you're there. So you have to first register in the express entry pool, and then the Ontario government, they'll comb through who's in the pool, and if they see that you qualify, and they'll usually announce a number themselves for your express entry points. So your express entry points always are very important, okay? Because the Ontario government will also do that. They'll announce a certain number, and if you qualify, they will send you what's called an expression of interest, and then you can go and apply with Ontario for 600 points. And if you get nominated, you get 600 points added, plus you're going to be a provincial nominee, which means that right now, every 2 weeks, there's still a draw, but it's always only now for provincial nominees, okay? So how do you get them interested? There's three main categories right now. The first is called the human capital stream. And there is one sort of level there called tech draws. And the government has said, we really need people in the tech industry here. And so if you have work experience in one of the enumerated tech occupations, software engineers, computer systems manager, I believe, these kind of things. Okay, if you are if you have work experience under that, you may have a chance to get expression of interest, but your points also matter. You have to be above a certain points for the express entry. They have also invited other people. Right now, oftentimes it's other occupations that they've identified. What other occupations are there? They don't tell you ahead of time. Okay. Maybe they have done job offers once before. Maybe they might do that again. But that is something you have to have a bachelor's degree or higher to do it. That's something that you, depending on your circumstances, you might be able to get through. The second one, this is for skilled trades. So people who have 1 year of work experience in a construction trade in Ontario, they also can be invited. And the third one, you lucky French speakers. If you can get a CLB level of 7 in French, that's akin to, the IELTS level of 6. That's basically what it is, or CELPIP of 7. Okay. You have to do your French exam, have to have the bachelor's degree, still look at your points for express entry, but you may have a chance to be invited then. Now, every province has their own streams. I certainly don't have enough time to go through 13 different provincial and territorial provincial nominee programs, but certainly if you come to us, you want to go to another place, then we can talk about that. Okay.
So those were the express entry streams, right? So that works in tandem with the federal system. Provinces also do have streams that are outside of express entry, right? So you don't have to have a profile in the federal pool. You're basically applying directly to the province. Now in Ontario, as of last year, the streams that are outside of express entry, the process of applying through them did change as well. So as of April 2021, the first step is for applicants who qualify under any of the non-express entry streams. The first step is creating what's called an expression of interest in the Ontario pool, and waiting in the pool until you receive an invitation to apply from the province. Now, when you create a profile and when you go into Ontario's pool, depending on the program that you qualify under, there are different point systems. Okay, so when we look at, and we'll talk about the different streams that fall into that Ontario has outside of their express entry streams. But what happens is you go into the pool, and based on the program that you qualify under, there's a points system. Okay, so you get a score, and again, it's the highest scoring individuals that Ontario goes in, selects, and issues invitations to apply to. Some of the criteria that they look at is your Canadian work experience, if you've studied here in Canada, what your field of study is, language proficiency, where you studied. All of these form a part of the point system that Ontario looks at when you're in their pool. Now, when you get an invitation to apply from Ontario, really important, you only have 14 days to submit your complete application. So it's a very short period of time for these non-express entry streams. The draws, Ontario does not give us any indication in advance of when they're going to be conducting draws, which programs they're conducting draws for, what types of scores they're looking for. There are no announcements in advance as to any of these criteria. So what that means is when you're eligible, you want to make sure that you're in the pool as early as possible so that you can benefit from as many draws, as many potential draws as Ontario potentially has. So when Ontario does do draws, they will post the result. They'll post that they have done a draw on their updates page, and they'll post the criteria there as well. And yeah, there's no set frequency. So it is important once you do qualify to go into the pool as soon as possible. And important to note that your profiles are valid for a year. Okay, so at the end of the year, the profile becomes ineligible and you'd have to create a new profile and go back into the pool.
Yeah. And yeah, I just wanted to point out a few things for you guys. When express entry becomes difficult to get through, then what people look at is, what else can I do? So then there's going to be we expect a lot more people to come into the OIMP non-express entry streams if they qualify, such as master's, PhD stream, which Sia will be talking about. So really, it's very important that you guys, get into the pool early, and you have your applications perfected when you submit the application in 14 days, because it's tragic when people get that invitation to apply, submit the application, miss a signature, miss this, miss that, and get it rejected. And then afterwards, you want to go back in and try to resubmit. There's too many people in the pool and you don't get another invitation to apply. Okay, so there are certain things that you have to be aware that immigration is not easy. It can be easy if you do it right, but it's certainly very easy to do it wrong.
Perfect. So let's take a look at the different streams that fall under these non-express entry based programs. So the first that we want to look at are the master's and PhD streams. So this is for individuals who have finished either a master's or PhD, and these are two different streams, but we'll talk about them together. But for individuals who have finished either a master's or a PhD here in Ontario. Now, you do have to apply within 2 years of graduating, right? So from when you look at your master's or your PhD diploma, the date that's on that actual diploma itself, from there you have 2 years to apply through the master's or PhD streams. For these programs, there's no job offer required. And so it doesn't matter, there's no work experience requirement, there's no job offer required. So as soon as you're done your program of study, you're eligible and able to go into the program. Okay, but it is important that you are looking to start working, right? You can't be, Ontario is looking for individuals who are ready and looking, their intent is to enter the labor market, so not pursuing further studies. And this is especially important when I find when we're dealing with master's students who potentially are looking to do a PhD right after their master's program. If the intent is to be continuing your studies and starting that PhD right away, then unfortunately you wouldn't be eligible at the time to apply through the master's stream.
And sometimes, guys, you have to think about what exactly your priority is. Is it your priority to get permanent residence? Is it your priority to get to go for your studies? Which one? And this is something that I often ask when people say, should I go and do a PhD? It's different for everybody. Some people it's to do the PhD. Some people it's to get permanent residence. But you also have to think about logistics as well, right? If you are doing the PhD, are you going to be able to, I think UofT allows you guys now to do local rates for PhD, right? But maybe fellowships might be difficult to get if you're not a permanent resident. So do think about these things as well.
Right. And then, yeah, lastly, like we talked about in the previous slide, the first step is going into the expression of interest system. So creating a profile, going into Ontario's pool and being selected through that pool, and then submitting your application. Like I said, Ontario does not tell us when they're going to do draws for any of the streams, and there's no regular cadence to when they're doing draws. Last year, if we take a look at the past year, in 2021, all of the master's and PhD draws were done between August and October, right? So for a very short period of time within the year, but that's not to say that it won't be spread out this year, or they might start earlier. So again, if you are eligible, you want to think about getting into that pool soon.
Yeah, it's just tragic when you think about you're going to go in, and then they have the draw, and you're like, shoot, I should have been in. That's, yeah. All right.
The other side of the non-express entry streams that Ontario has is for individuals with a job offer. So these are the employer-based streams. There are 3 streams here, and all of them have criteria on the company that's supporting your application, the position you're being offered, and on you as the applicant. So let's first look at the employer requirements. When we're talking about the company that's supporting this application, where they're located, right? So whether the company is located within the Greater Toronto Area or outside of the GTA is important when we're looking at the specific criteria. So for an employer inside of the Greater Toronto Area within the GTA, they have to be able to demonstrate a gross income in their past fiscal year of $1 million. Okay, they currently have to have at least 5 full-time employees that are either Canadians or permanent residents. Those numbers decrease for companies that are located outside of the Greater Toronto Area. Okay, the gross income reduces to $500,000, and they only have to have 3 full-time Canadians or permanent resident employees at the time of your application. Regardless of where the company is located, they do have to have been in business for at least 3 calendar years, and they do have to have a location within Ontario, right, that you're going to be working out of. In terms of the position, it does have to be a full-time and a permanent position. Okay, really important, the word permanent. Okay, so it's basically that the contract that you're being offered is not a time-based contract. So if it's a 1-year position or 2-year contract, that would qualify for these employer-based streams. It needs to be on an indeterminate basis. So there's no end date that's listed on that job offer.
And for you guys who are on your postdoc work permits, for example, and you say, well, that I don't qualify because it's not permanent. What you could do is you could look at getting a job offer from another business, right? Now, remember how I said LMIAs are difficult to get because the employers, they have to advertise and they hate doing that and they have to show. Well, this is an alternative to this, because if you have a work permit in Ontario and you're working in Ontario, the employer does not have to then advertise and show that they can't find a Canadian to do the job. So we could go through this system if you were to have another job somewhere else, for example, in the private sector, where they would be willing to offer you a permanent full-time job. And we could go through the system and get, because the provincial nominations not only allow you to get permanent residence, they also allow you to get a work permit as well. And these maybe take around, what, 3 months or so, maybe sometimes even faster.
Yeah, right now it's about 2 to 3 months.
Yeah, like, and so, with that, you just apply for a work permit. Work permit, PR, kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
So looking at the different streams of these employer-based programs, the first is for international students. So this is for an individual who has finished a program of study here in Ontario. Okay, again, you do have to apply within 2 years of your graduation. And there are specific programs that qualify for this international student stream. So either you've completed a program that's 2 years or longer, or you have done a 1-year postgraduate program, which requires a degree and only a degree as the admission requirement. Okay, so if you're doing a postgraduate program that requires a degree or a diploma, right? So the admission criteria says that we'll accept applicants or we'll accept students that have completed either a degree or a diploma or a degree or work experience. That or word in there, which gives an alternative to that degree as an admission requirement, that takes you out of the eligibility for the international student stream. Okay, so to go over that again, when we're talking about programs that qualify, either it's a 2-year or longer program, or if you've done a 1-year program, then it needs to require a degree as an admission requirement for the program. With the international student stream, you do need to have a high-skilled job offer, but you need no work experience, right? So you don't have to be able to show any work experience in the occupation that you're being offered a position in. And the wage that the employer is offering you has to meet an entry-level wage. So this is lower than what we see in some other streams that we'll talk about in a moment. Okay. Comparatively, there is the skilled worker stream. Okay. For this program, you do have to have at least 2 years of work experience in the same occupation that the employer is offering you a job in, and that work experience has to be within the past 5 years. Okay. If that work experience doesn't necessarily have to be in Ontario or in Canada, you can have work experience that's from outside of Canada. But when we're talking about wages for this program, the employer does have to be offering you at the median level wage, so the prevailing wage, which is a bit higher generally than the entry level wage for the international student stream.
Just a couple of things I wanted to bring to your attention. You know, people are saying, well, I qualify for the master's and PhD stream. Why would I care about this? Because the master's and PhD stream may or may not be available to you. There's a certain limit in how many people the government invites for the master's and PhD stream. Last year, they only did it one time. You know, before the system came into play, it was like buying the hottest ticket on Ticketmaster ever. Like it would have been like it was trying to just get in when the program was open was crazy. So these are a little bit more relaxed, and you might have more of a chance, for example, to go through the international student class because your program is, you know, is a really good program, and your English levels are good, and etc. So this might be a very good alternative. Now, one of the things that you guys have to keep in mind is oftentimes employers, because you have to get the employers on board to do this. Oftentimes the employers, they don't understand what this program is about. They might think it's an LMIA, or they can't find a Canadian, they have to show they can't find a Canadian to do the job, when they don't necessarily need to do that. They also are often very reluctant to share with you details of their business, such as financial statements or payroll of other employees. So it's very important at this point to hire a lawyer who can act as a buffer. Because lawyers, we have what's called solicitor-client privilege, and we can't reveal information to our clients. So if the employer also works with us, they're our client as well. And we act then as the firewall between sending information to you, because we can submit everything to the government. Okay, and that might make the employer more comfortable as well in these circumstances.
Perfect. And then the last employer-based stream is the in-demand stream. These are for specific occupations. So Ontario has outlined occupations both within the GTA and outside of the GTA that would qualify for the in-demand stream. In terms of eligibility, you do already need to have at least 9 months of work experience within Ontario in the same occupation as the job offer. Majority of these are more in with Ontario. There's positions like farm workers, construction trade. So I don't want to spend too much time on this program, but it is another option that Ontario does have.
Yeah, I mean, we've had spouses, you know, of the students, right? Your spouses get your open work permits. So we've had spouses qualify under this category. The work experience, like Zia said, is low skilled work experience, but it is very needed work. And so if your spouse has an open work permit and they find a job working in one of these occupations, work for 9 months, they might, for example, if you're doing a PhD and it takes 5 years for you to graduate, and your spouse is able to qualify for this after working for 9 months, we probably should have them apply as the principal applicant to get the permanent residence.
And especially since there's not that many programs out there for that include low skilled positions, right? And so this is that one program that Ontario does have that includes work experience in low and what Ontario considers low skilled positions.
Okay, I just wanted to throw a little bit of entrepreneur sort of spin to some of these things, because I know that some of you might be very entrepreneurial, and especially you know, with the high tech industries, and you guys are all like amazing people. So there is such a thing as a startup visa. How it works is you and up to 4 other people. You don't have to apply with 4 other, you can just apply by yourself. But you and up to 4 other people can apply together as founders of a innovative startup company. And each of you guys have to own at least 10%. And all of the founders together have to own majority shares. So this is not something where you take a minority share of a company with another Canadian, okay? Everybody who applies has to all together own majority shares of the company. Pass English French level of 5, that's easy. And each of you have to show that you are active, you are able and willing to have an active management role as well. Very importantly, you guys, your business has to receive support from a designated organization, incubator, angel investor group, venture capital group. Mostly we're looking at incubators and angel investor groups here. You can apply for permanent residence and a work permit to work on your program if you get the letter of support, okay? This is something that really does require a lot of guidance with regard to how to structure, you know, your business plans, your business, etc. But it is something that if you guys are planning to open up your own startup, this is something that could be possible. Okay, so if that's the case, come and talk to us, and we can certainly see if this is a good thing for you guys. All right, we talked a lot about different programs and such. What should you guys do next?
First thing is to make sure that you have a plan, right? So know what your immigration goal is, know what you want to achieve, and you know, you want to make sure in advance you're sitting down and you're planning out how you're going to get there, right? The first step is obviously attending webinars like these where you're getting some information, but this is only the tip of the iceberg, okay? This is very, very high level, very general in terms of the different options, the different programs, what the eligibility criteria, what the process is. We can spend all day sitting here and going through the programs and how you actually apply and how you qualify. It's really important to sit down with a professional who can go through your background and can really identify for you what the best options are and what that path to permanent residence, if that's your goal, what that looks like and how you can achieve it. And it's not just about having a plan A, right? So you do want to make sure that you have a plan B and if possible, a plan C, because immigration does change very often and very quickly. And so really great to have plans, to know where you want to go and to make sure that you're taking the right steps throughout that time to get there. We talked about the postgrad work permit, for example, an important step towards getting the work experience and applying for permanent residence. But that postgrad work permit, you can only get once, right? And so you want to make sure, for example, that you're using that time wisely so that you're getting the work experience you need to apply for your permanent residence.
Yeah, so, you know, once you know what your plan is, then you need to actually do it, right? And it's easier said than done. But there are certain things that you just have to do if you want to immigrate. For example, the IELTS, pain in the neck, you know, but you have to study, take those practice exams, right? Because even if your English is fantastic, people say, look, I'm doing a PhD, I have to write thesis. Obviously I can, but you know what, in the end, it's really surprising the results that people often get on the IELTS, even while you're doing your PhDs. The IELTS and the CELPIP and all of these language exams often they test that what they really test is how well you can do these exams. So even if English or French is your first language, know what to expect, do some practice exams, you know, so that you can make sure that you can get the results that you need, because 0.5 of difference in an exam can be the difference between being able to get 90 more points to 90 less points on express entry, for example. Okay. The work experience. What kind of work experience do you need, right? You know, it is sometimes important to get some training on how to go for those job offers and how to present yourself. You know, getting and ranged employment, right? If you need a ranged employment, how much time is left, right? So all of these kind of things, it's not easy. Definitely, it's not easy to immigrate to Canada. It gets harder and harder. I get so upset when people say, oh, I immigrated 20, 30 years ago. It was so easy for me. And it was so hard for me then. And now it's so easy for people. And I'm like, no, it's much, much harder. Every year it gets harder for people to immigrate. But you know what? You guys are here. You guys are doing it. You guys are what the government identifies as the ideal applicants, ideal candidates for Canadian immigration. If you guys can't do it, it's going to be hard for other people to do it. So you guys can do it, okay? Just do it one step at a time.
We've talked about this one throughout the entire presentation, right? You do want to make sure that you're keeping your status while you're here in Canada. It's really important, you know, to keep that status, because losing your status can affect not only your ability to work, your ability to qualify for permanent residence. It can make it more difficult because then you have to try and get it back. It's really important. Have an immigration plan, know what you want to do, and make sure that you're staying in status throughout that time.
Yeah, and it just, you know, sometimes people say to me, oh yeah, I can just pretend I had this work experience. What kind of work experience do you need? And I'll just give it to you. And I said, no, like you can't do that, okay? It seems, sometimes people think it's so easy just to fib a little bit, have a little white lie. Who, you know, what does it matter in the end? It matters because, number one, if you get caught, and immigration officers are not stupid, okay? They are used to, you know, dealing with all sorts of different things. And if you get caught, then you are banned from Canada for 5 years. And trying to get another study permit or work permit or visa, temporary resident visa, even after the 5 years, likely not, because you have zero credibility at that point, okay? You're going to you probably will meet a lot of people in the immigration industry who tell you it doesn't matter. They can help you. They've done it before with other people. Don't worry about that. But you should certainly worry about that. Even after you get your permanent residence, if you misrepresent, you probably won't sleep. You shouldn't sleep very well afterwards, because there's been many, many incidents where years afterwards, they've cracked down on these consultants who have defrauded immigration. It's essentially fraud, and it's criminal. It's a criminal offense, and you can get your permanent residence and even your citizenship stripped afterwards as well. Okay, it's just not worth it. And finally, when if your application is ever rejected, contact a lawyer right away, okay? A lot of people think, well, I called the call center, they told me this and that, and and then, you know, I did whatever they said and they should be okay, right? No, not really, okay? Because the immigration call center is not like an Amazon call center, okay? They're not really there to help you and be on your side. They have their own interests with IRCC, and also whatever you say, even if you say, oh, they told me this, it doesn't count. It doesn't count at all, because mistake of law is not an excuse, even if the mistake of law comes from the IRCC call center, okay? For example, if you have your postgrad work permit rejected because the officer thought it was, full-time studies, it wasn't full-time studies, and yet it was, right? And you go and call the call center. They say, oh, okay, no worries. I'm going to put a note on this, or you can just write a letter and send it out and it'll be fine, okay? Probably won't be fine because A, you probably don't know what to write. And if you send it in and it's rejected, okay, that counts as a reconsideration. And so if they reject your reconsideration and then you come to someone like me and you say, Elizabeth, now can you help me? I said, well, your options are very limited because I can't go and write another reconsideration submissions to IRCC. They won't even look at what I'm writing because they say you already did it once, okay? You also have very strict deadlines. If you have an application rejected while you're in Canada and it's sent to a Canadian office, you only have 15 days from the date of rejection to file a notice to federal court. If you go past that, you lose your opportunity, okay? So it's very important to contact a lawyer right away who can tell you whether or not to go to federal court. If you call the call center, they are never going to tell you to go to federal court because they represent the government, okay? You also may be out of time to file restoration of status, etc. So, whatever it is, contact a lawyer right away. Okay, so that's basically the end of our presentation, but we'll be here to answer questions for you guys. This is our contact information. If you want to have a personal consultation to figure out your plan, do contact us. Do let us know that you've come to this webinar because we will offer you a discounted rate. It's like $100 for people who have attended a webinar, and we can figure things out for you guys. And everything is by video camera. So don't worry about not being able. Although our office is like, I don't know, 5-minute subway ride from you guys. It's Richmond and Church. Okay. All right. Let's get to some Q&As. All right. So shall we just go through them one at a time? All right.
Let's do it.
So Zia, does work during implied status count towards 1 year of work experience for Canadian experience class or federal skilled worker class?
Yeah, so once you have completed your program of study, okay, and you've applied for your postgrad work permit, assuming you're eligible to work while you're waiting for that postgrad work permit, that time, as soon as you have submitted your postgrad work permit, you're on implied status, you can count that towards your work experience for Canadian experience class. Okay. For federal skilled worker, so I guess there's different types of implied status, right? When you're finishing your program of study and you're applying for your postgrad work permit, that period of time will count towards CEC. If you're between work permits, right? So you finish one work permit, you're applying for another work permit and you're on implied status at that point, you can use it for either. It doesn't really matter.
Okay.
Okay. Next question. Can we combine different jobs under the same NOC code? And second part of this is how do we search for the best suited NOC code for the role?
So can we combine the first different jobs under the same NOC code for what? What are you talking about?
So let's first talk about CEC.
So for CEC, you could for CEC. For federal skilled worker, if it's talking about just a 1 year work experience, it has to be under the same occupation, right? For OIMP, so it really depends on which program it is, right? How do you find the best suited NOC code for the role? You're talking about matching the NOC code to your work experience. You can go online and look at it. Oftentimes it's kind of ambiguous. So, it's kind of an art rather than a science per se, but, we have to fit it under. And oftentimes it's very important to draft the employment letters carefully, because if you just take a normal job description and that the employer might advertise, it doesn't necessarily describe everything that you do in a way that also conforms to a particular NOC code, right? So that can be, normally we don't get the employers to just draft their own employment letters. Usually 90% of that would be incorrect. So it's important to, have these things done carefully. All right, if we are working in a role since we are students and continue working on the same role as on the PGWP, can we count these hours on a study permit towards 60 hours accumulation thingy?
So again, it does depend on the program you're applying through. If you're applying for the Federal Skilled Worker Program, the work experience has to be continuous, but yes, you can use work experience that you've obtained while you're on your study permit and while you're a student. If you're applying through Canadian Experience class, then no, the work experience that you've accumulated while you're a full-time student will not count towards your 1 year, so your 1,560 hours. So again, it just really depends on the program that you're looking at. Elizabeth, if you want to do a full-time internship that's very much related to your studies, but the department does not require it for your program of study, and so you've decided to potentially pause your studies or do it in addition to your studies, is that possible?
Okay. So yes, so if you have something called the co-op work permit, and the co-op work permit allows you to work in a program that is required as part of your studies. What this person seems to be saying is that the internship, I'm not sure if it's required part of your studies or it's just related. If it's just related and you don't need to complete it as part of your PhD or master's program, for example, then you do need to get a work permit if you're going to work full-time. If you're going to work part-time, you can just work off-campus part-time, or if it's on campus, you can work full-time. But if it's off-campus and you want to work for it full-time and it's not part of your integral to your studies, even if it's related, let's say I'm a software engineer or I'm studying software engineering and this company wants to hire me to do some software engineering, it's related, but it's not part of my program, then you would need to get a work permit for that. Okay. All right. So I'm an international student on a study permit. I completed my MBA this April. My study permit is valid until September. Can I travel outside of Canada in April, re-enter Canada by June, and then apply for my postgrad work permit? Or will I risk being denied entry because my course is complete? I do have a job offer and I'm starting in July.
Okay. It all depends. Technically, yes, once you have applied for your postgrad work permit, you can exit while the application's in processing, and technically you can re-enter as long as your study permit is still valid. And keep in mind, when I say valid, I am really referring to that 90-day period and not the expiry date on your study permit if it's longer than 90 days. But with that being said, we have seen lots happening in terms of travel restrictions and travel requirements over the last 2 years. And so, COVID has had a huge impact on ability to travel, on ability to re-enter Canada. And so that's definitely going to be the caveat to any answer here. But technically, yes, while your postgrad work permit application's in processing, you are able to travel, you are able to re-enter if you still do have a valid study permit. Now, the risk is if you're stuck outside of Canada waiting for your postgrad work permit, and if you're from a country that requires a visa, keep in mind that the postgrad work permit application itself is separate when you're applying from in Canada from that visa. You don't automatically get your temporary resident visa at the same time as your postgrad work permit. And so it would be a separate application that you would also need to do if you do need a visa as well. So lots to think about.
Yeah, I mean, it's really about your risk tolerance, right? In general, I don't think it's a great idea to travel right now, especially during the pandemic. You never know what might happen. It's a lot easier if you get your work permit and then travel afterwards. Okay, next one. Is it my turn?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Can one apply for postgrad work permit near the end of the PhD? No, you have to finish. Easy. That was easy. Good. Okay.
For any postgrad work permit, you have to finish the program first. You receive confirmation that you finished it, and then you can apply for the postgrad work permit.
Okay. So yeah, my degree program on my offer letter is MA Economics general program 1 year, but it only has 2 semesters, so 8 months of actual study. Will I get a 1 year postgrad work permit or an 8-month postgrad work permit? Does it matter if I submit only my letter of completion and not my transcript for my postgrad work permit?
Yeah, so I think we talked about this a little earlier when we were talking about the postgrad work permit, the length of it. IRCC is looking at the length of the program, right? So 1 year, 1 academic year is 2 semesters and 8 months of actually studying. And so as long as it is still considered a 1 year program, you would be eligible for the 1 year postgrad work permit.
Yeah, and this is where it's important to get a proper letter from the university. The university should state that it's a 1 year program, and not an 8-month program. Also, the transcripts are super important. How the officers don't often rely or basically trust the letters from the schools when they say that you've been a full-time student. They want to see your transcripts and see how many courses you took. And if your transcripts don't clearly indicate that you took a full course load, you have to explain, and you have to get the school to sometimes explain what happened there. Okay. Oftentimes we'll have students, come and they've had their postgrad rejected because the school didn't really indicate on the transcripts. For example, you have a full course load, but you only get the grades in the second semester because it spans 2 semesters, right? So these kind of things is super important, because what happens is if your postgrad work permit is rejected, you might be out of the 180 days to even apply for another work permit. Your restoration of status would kick in, so you can't work while waiting for your work permit for the second work permit anymore. So a lot of messiness happens there.
Right. The next question here, as a PhD student, if I graduate and do a postdoc position, for example, for 2 years in another country, I suppose that I will not be eligible for the postgrad work permit when I decide to return to Canada. Is that correct?
Correct. If you don't apply for your postgrad work permit within 180 days, you are no longer eligible for a postgrad work permit. And if you don't have your student status anymore, you could apply for the postgrad work permit. Let's say you got a 3-year work permit, and then go out of the country. Things like this, it really needs some personal planning to see what is the right plan for you, right? Okay, is a work semester, PEY co-op, etc., considered a full-time status at school?
So the definition of full-time students or full-time status is dependent on the school itself. So I would check with your international student department in terms of what is considered full-time. Generally, if the co-op is supposed to be your only course, or the only thing you're doing that semester, then it could be. But again, you want to double check with the school, because IRCC defers to the school to determine what is full-time.
Yes, and also oftentimes, I say the school's letter, the officers don't necessarily trust school's letter when they say someone's full-time all the time. The school may have to explain it a little bit more in detail, or you might have to, oftentimes we, pull things off of the academic, the policies of the school to show what is full-time as well.
Okay. Next question, Elizabeth. What if I had 1 year left on my passport, and so I only got a 1 year postgrad work permit, even though I completed a 4-year degree and should have received a 3-year work permit? can I apply to extend that work permit?
Yes, you can. That's for sure. You can certainly, near the end of your work permit, you can apply. Normally on your work permit, it'll state issued until the length of your end of the passport. So in those cases, you can. So yeah, I am planning to renew my passport since it expires July 2023, but then my study permit will have the wrong travel document listed on an old passport. So my question is, after graduation, when I apply for postgrad work permit, which requires my study permit to be still valid, will I need a new study permit to be shown, hence applying for study permit extension, or will my old one still work?
So the passport number that's listed on your study permit doesn't necessarily need to be the same as your current passport. IRCC gets that, passports are going to be renewed, and it's fine if you are applying with your new passport, but your study permit has your old passport listed on there. Elizabeth, for graduating students, do you recommend CC over FSW?
It's like asking me, for graduating students, do you recommend that they eat meat or vegetables? I don't know. It depends on your own individual circumstances. Okay, so don't assume that whatever works for your friends works for you. It really requires you to have an individual plan. Does co-op work experience count for CEC, Sia?
No, it doesn't, because you're still a student while you're obtaining that work experience, and so it's excluded from the work requirement in CEC. Elizabeth, can TA work while doing your PhD program count towards work experience? And if so, which program of Express Entry?
Okay, so let's make it very clear. There's a difference between work experience counted towards getting into the Express Entry pool and work experience that would count towards giving you points to get out of the Express Entry pool. Okay, so to get into the Express Entry pool, you can use TA-RA work experience to qualify under the Federal Skilled Worker class. But that work experience, because you were likely a full-time student at that point, does not give you the points for Canadian work experience for points for the Express Entry points. So that would not give you those points to raise your Express Entry points for the draws. Okay. Does foreign post-doctoral experience count in foreign work experience?
Assuming it's completed outside of Canada, then yes, it could be work experience that you're obtaining to be eligible under the Federal Skilled Worker Program, and that can get you points in the CRS points for work experience outside of Canada.
Yeah, as long as you can prove it.
Mm-hmm.
By proving it means you have to have a letter that is drafted properly, signed. It can't just be any old letter from the employer just stating something. You have to have it properly stated with all the elements on it, and you have to be paid as well.
Right. Yes, the paid part is definitely very important.
Yeah.
Okay, next question, Elizabeth. If I had a co-op term but was unable to find a job, so I didn't study or work during that term, will that disqualify me from the postgrad work permit?
If I had a co-op work permit, it just depends on whether or not you qualify to graduate, and that's up to the school. So if the school says you graduated, then you can qualify for the postgrad work permit.
I think the question is about the continuity piece, though. If a term out of that period, because you said that the studies need to have been full-time and continuous.
Right. It's not necessarily continuous, but I see what you mean in that a person may have lost their status after 90 days for not doing anything. What I might suggest that you could think about doing is asking the school for authorized leave, which will give you a whole semester. It's 150 days that you can take off for that period of time. So that then keeps you in status and still qualifies you for the postgrad program. Zia, what do they mean by the ability to speak fluent French? What qualifies as fluent?
So generally, you're looking at a CLB of 7 for most programs. So that's equivalent to, again, you were talking about this earlier, 6s in each category on the IELTS test. I only use IELTS because a lot of people are more familiar with it, or 7s on the CELPIP test.
Yeah, so it's when you're doing the French test, it's called the TEF or TCF, right?
TCF, yep.
TF. So, but just to give you an idea of what the level it would be, so if you're familiar with the IELTS, the 6 levels for IELTS or 7 for CELPIP, and it's not, speaking is kind of a misnomer. It's not just speaking, it's reading, writing, speaking, and listening. All 4 of them, you have to achieve that level.
And then again, you know, it does depend on the program you're applying through and what you're using it for, right? So if you're applying just for the Francophone work permit, for example, then meeting those minimum scores is great. It's fine. It qualifies you, and that's great. If you're trying to use it for points and express entry, then of course 7s will give you a certain amount of score, but a higher score on that language test will be more, could be more beneficial for you as well. So it does depend. You want to keep in mind the program that you're applying through as well.
Yeah, but usually, like, if you get that level, you qualify for the Francophone. You can qualify for 50 points for express entry, just for the extra 50 points for French-speaking people, plus your second language points, like Zia said, that can vary. For the also for the French-speaking stream for OIMP, it's also that level as well. Okay, my turn, right? Can we apply the 2 streams at the same time? You can apply for different programs, yes, with regard to permanent residents. But Zia, I think if you're applying for 2 streams for the OIMP, they will cancel, they'll give you one, but
Yes.
then they will cancel. If you apply twice, they will cancel the second one, right? They wouldn't.
Yeah, but you can be in multiple pools. So if we're talking about the expression of interest, for example, so let's say you qualify under the master stream and the international student stream. You can create profiles in both those streams. You can create profile at the same time in the express entry federal skilled worker, like as a skilled worker candidate. All of those may be streams that you qualify for at the same time. You can have all of those profiles active and then continue on with whichever one you get an invitation through.
All right, we have 8 minutes left. Let's try to get through these as much as possible, and then we'll be done. Okay. If you're nominated by one province, does that mean you're obligatorily attached to that province?
Well, when you're applying through any provincial program, you are declaring an intent to live and work in that province. However, once you become a permanent resident, you do have mobility rights, and so that means that you are able to move around. But of course, if throughout the PR application you're going through a P&P stream, and at the same time you're applying to jobs or buying a house in a different province, this may go back to what Elizabeth was talking about in terms of misrepresentation, right? Because you are stating throughout that application process that you have an intent to be in that province. Now, let's say you become a permanent resident and then 2-3 months down the line, you get a fantastic job offer in another province. It doesn't mean that you have to remain in Ontario, for example, and you can't move to that other province.
Okay.
Does OIMP express entry stream require the applicant to work in? Oh, this is
I think
kind of similar.
almost the same
Same
thing.
question.
We'll move to the next one then.
All right.
So an international student, while studying and without prior degree in Ontario, cannot apply for the OIMP stream, right?
No, you can. Like if you've graduated from another province, but it's still in Canada, you can qualify for the international student stream if you have the job offer in Canada. You don't even have to have any degree to qualify for the foreign worker stream, but you do need to have 2 years of work experience in the occupation. So it just depends on which program that you want to apply for. The master's and PhD does require you to have graduated within Ontario.
Perfect. I think you've answered a couple of these. Okay.
Are the provincial non-express entry streams in general less competitive than the provincial express entry streams?
It depends. I mean, really, it does depend on what Ontario's doing with their draws, how often they're doing them, how large of a draws they're doing. There's so many different factors that go into what is easier, what's more difficult at any given time. The Master's OIMP has a requirement of 1 year residency in Ontario. If I have a lease for a year, but visited another country for a month, will that count against my residency in Ontario?
I think normally that's.
So it is cumulative. It is cumulative. You are looking for a year of residence in Ontario when you're looking at the master's stream. But it doesn't have to be continuous. So you can look at different periods of time together. So if you are leaving for a month, that's fine. When you come back, when you then have totaled a year of residence in Ontario, then you can look at the master's stream.
Zia is our expert in OIMPs. I get her to do all the she has all the inside information for OIMPs. Okay. For someone looking to work in Canada via express entry, does it mean that they may have to wait for a year to get invited in a draw? And maybe they can't get a work permit within a year of trying. Okay, I just wanted to say, look, here's a situation. The government right now, the minister, and we know this because they've been meeting with the Canadian Bar Association, they've told us that they're trying to help international students stay in the country, but they're kind of still pondering as to what to do with regard to these situations. There may be programs that are coming out this year that may be helping international students. No promise yet. We will be, as soon as these programs are announced, we do send out newsletters. We often have, our own webinars if there are any issues, or videos, just to, when there's a new program, just to try to explain it to you guys. So yeah, so look out for our newsletters and we'll let you know if we hear of anything. Okay. Ooh, this is a burning question. It says burning question. When is the FSW draws resuming? Is the union taking any measures to propose the government to resume it soon? Or is the union going to propose something so that IELTS scores are considered even after 2 years? Ben and Amy and Zasna, I'll leave that to you guys.
I can jump in off video. I'd say that at this point, we haven't taken direct action initiated by the union on these issues. However, we have supported a lot of the really great work done by Migrant Rights Network and Migrant Student Network. And if you have suggestions on further actions that we can take, please just be in touch with myself, Ben, or Sasna.
Mm-hmm. No, I think it's an important thing to consider. And it's not something just like one union can do, but maybe a lot of unions together and a lot of schools and universities together can maybe, make a difference as well.
Join the WhatsApp and we can organize around that issue. But let's
I want to be part of your WhatsApp. Okay. I'm gonna go on your WhatsApp. Okay. All right.
Not sure you do actually.
Oh, I can't. Eh? Okay. Well, next time.
You might be bombarded with questions. We'll talk.
Oh, okay. Zia, for foreign work experience for federal skilled worker program, how do we know what is high skilled? Do the same NOC categories apply?
So high skilled right now, based on the current system, is anything that falls under NOC O, A, or B. NOC C and D are considered low skilled. And yes, this is the same high skilled, low skilled distinction as we use for all the other different immigration programs. But like Elizabeth talked about earlier, we are moving to the tier system. So things will change a little bit once IRCC comes and implements that. Next question. I already had my postgrad work permit after finishing my master's and was not able to use that opportunity to become a permanent resident. I went back home and came back for PhD now. Am I not getting another postgrad work permit after I complete my PhD?
Yeah, likely you won't get a postgrad work permit when you finish your PhD. Do come to us and we can see what we can figure out for your situation. Zia, does FSW eligibility require full-time employment or can part-time employment count?
Part-time employment can count. You just have to get to the full year, which is 1,560 hours.
You can add it all together, but
Yes,
it has to be continuous in one occupation.
exactly.
So oh, sorry.
Basically, is express entry the only option for a master's graduate who's starting their PhD right away and without work experience?
You may not qualify. I don't know about TA work experience. Oftentimes TA may not be enough. So we'll have to see. There are programs outside of what we talked about. For example, if you're common law with a Canadian or permanent resident, or there may be new programs. Like last year, there was the TR to PR program. Maybe you could qualify for federal skilled worker. We'll have to see, and that might be something that you might want to think about, whether or not you want to do your PhD or not as well, and we can talk about that. Okay, just an update. Oh, okay.
Sorry, we answered that.
Oh, okay. How much is a consultation fee and how can we schedule one?
Yeah, so when,
yeah,
go ahead.
Oh, okay. So if you guys tell us that you come to this webinar, we'll give you the discount. It's $100. And just, oops, you can contact us on this email. And then we'll schedule one for you guys. If you apply to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
If you apply to extend or change your conditions on the employer-specific work permit, do you switch to implied status immediately once you've submitted the application to extend or change, or does your status become implied only once the original permit has expired?
Yeah, your status becomes implied only once the original permit has expired, because you still have worker status until your work permit has expired. Just want to let you know that when you are on implied status, it doesn't mean that you can just go and change jobs on implied status, okay? When you apply for extension of a work permit, the implied status is from the previous work permit. So you have the status of the previous work permit until you go and get your new work permit. Okay, which is better choice for a postdoc position, postgrad work permit, or work permit specific for the job? Can I get both?
Yes, you can get both. Which is a better choice will depend on your circumstances. One's an open, one's a closed work permit. I'd recommend, scheduling a consultation appointment, going through your background in a better position at that point to tell you what makes the most sense for you. Okay, another question here. What is the start date of the postgrad work permit? For example, if you get a 1-year postgrad work permit, does it start from when you received the postgrad work permit, or does it retroactively apply from when you applied?
Oh, sorry. I was just looking at another one. Sorry, what was that? Can you answer that? Because I can't even see it on the Q&A.
The start date of generally the postgrad work permit is valid for the period of time after it's issued. So if you're supposed to get a 1-year postgrad work permit, it would be from once it's actually issued. So that time that you're in implied status, it wouldn't detract from the length of the postgrad work permit.
So Zia, this person says, I had been told that I am ineligible for federal skilled worker, even though I have 2 undergraduate degrees, one from my country, another one in Canada. I have 2 years work experience outside of Canada and 3 years part-time work while schooling in Canada. My IELTS score was 6 points written last year. Now I'm confused on why I was not eligible for express entry. Going through the calculator, I should be eligible. What reasons are there to be ineligible for a skilled worker?
Lots of reasons. I mean, there is a points, part of the skilled worker criteria is that there is points that you have to get. You know, I think in this situation, the best thing to do would be to schedule a consultation appointment. We can go through your background. We can look at exactly what your situation is and talk about what you're eligible for and how you can apply for it.
3 more left. Wow. All
Almost
right,
there.
Actually, okay.
This is a lightning round. What if my spouse has ties to another province, for example, schooling elsewhere? Does this affect my application using PNP?
It's a good question, but the main thing is your intent to remain in Ontario afterwards. So if your spouse went to school in another province, but now you guys live in Ontario, that's pretty good indication that you intend to be in Ontario. The main thing you gotta understand is if you're applying for a PNP, you should be in the province when you're applying, or you have a very good reason that you're going to be moving to the province after you've received the nomination. And also you should stay in the province until you get your permanent residence, because if you move out, that's very good indication that you don't intend to be in the province, okay? But then once you have your permanent residence, and if you say, I don't want to stay here anymore, you do have the ability to move to another province. Is postdoc work permit different from postgrad work permit?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, next question.
Very different.
Yes, it is. The postgrad work permit is an open work permit, whereas the postgrad work permit is the open one, whereas the postdoc work permit is an employer-specific one, and there's specific conditions in terms of eligibility.
Yeah.
Last question. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, like there was a previous question who asked, can you get both? So you often could qualify for both. Now, whether or not which one is better for you guys, it really depends on your own circumstances. Yeah. We can talk about that. Okay. All right.
This is a great question. There was a federal PhD stream back in 2011. Is there any chance for this one to come back?
Can the union do anything?
And can the union do anything? Yes.
First of all, there was a federal PhD stream before, but I don't necessarily know that it's great for express entry, because the federal PhD stream was before express entry, and it allowed people to just apply for permanent residence under the federal skilled worker class. Now, even if you can get in, and you can get in, there's no need to have a separate thing. You can get in, but it doesn't mean that you'll be chosen. I certainly think that there should be something, the government should turn their minds to helping students, PhD students such as yourselves, be able to qualify for permanent residence before you guys, graduate after 5 years. And I'll leave it to you guys as to whether or not you think the union can do anything.
Yeah, well, let me quickly try to answer that, at least to give a temporary answer, which is, we are the union, you are the union, we are the union together, and join the WhatsApp, and we can talk about ways seriously that the local, in concert, as Elizabeth and Amy were both suggesting earlier, in concert with other unions, student representative bodies, and other supports in the community, we can definitely look at ways to lobby the government and the university as necessary to try and affect change on that front. Elizabeth and Zia, before thanking you so much, and it's incredible that you did actually manage to answer all those questions, particularly given that I had said that we wouldn't have time for that. So thanks for proving me wrong. There was one question in the WhatsApp, just a clarificatory one. I think you mentioned was it that the discounted amount for a consultation would be 100? That was someone else's experience in the past. Great. Just to, people are keen to, I think, schedule those, but wanted to just be clear about the amount. So after the discount, it would be 100 for that initial
100
consultation.
plus tax. We have to charge the
Plus
HST.
tax, yeah.
So
100
$113.
lucky 13.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, both of you. Really so useful. It's so complicated. I feel like I'm probably not alone in saying that as my first time going through a session like this, my mind is kind of on fire, but I'm sure I speak for everyone who's still here and for the many who had to leave when we say how grateful we are to both of you for your time. And yeah, we'll give a virtual round of applause and thanks. And thanks everyone for joining. I don't know if there's anything, any final words you wanted to leave us with, or.
For me, it was a pleasure to be here. And just to let you know, we will be sending out the slides to you guys who attended, and it's going to be recorded on YouTube as well. So, we'll post we'll tell you guys all about those links.
Fantastic. If you can post the link to, or like send out the link to the recording to registrants, that would be fantastic.
It will be. Excellent. I just have to do it. I have to edit
There's
first.
Been a lot of there've been a lot of requests for that also. Yeah. So that's excellent to know. All right. Well, thanks everyone. I think with that, we'll let Elizabeth and Zia get back to their evenings.
Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks so much,
Bye.
everyone.
And thank you, Tasna,
it.
for helping to organize this as well. Really,
Yes.
I couldn't have done it without you. All right, and we'll stay in touch.